swings and things.
Yes.
If anything, we're gonna get really good at the swing. Because if we don't have the swing down, we can't clean, we can't snatch, we can't rack. So if we're gonna take away anything from this coach session is dial in the swing. And that carries over to so many different things. Clients who can't run, swing. They can't jump, swing, because the kettlebell swing translates into those movement patterns, and it does create better outcomes. So what we have to set before, or check before, we get somebody to swing a kettlebell, if that's in the program. Samstand! Everybody go up to the samstand. Who wants to lead it? And now you don't throw somebody who's never doesn't know what we're talking about.
Okay, then I will.
So last month, she was like, right, I gotta do the samstand. I'm like, did she go through it? Because it's not even a name.
To be fair, we went through it briefly.
Sure. Okay. Now let's just take your leg to the samstand.
Okay.
And then we'll go, and then we'll review after what would be the most important components of the samstand that we would need to clear for hill swings. All right? Ready? 3 minutes. Go.
Okay, so 1 foot in front of the other, hitting hands in front, glue your fingertips together, close your eyes, and we're trying not to, well, you're seeing it, we're jipping off to either side. Here for 10, and then you're going to do the other foot, same thing. Noticing any differences on either side, jipping off, shaky legs for 10, and then your next one is your step test. So hands up in front, same idea. Eyes closed, you're marching on the spot for 30 counts. You're counting, you're not counting it loud. So that the client just steps and then totally stop when you're at 30. And you're looking at any deviations there. Either side, swaying, going forward, rotating, in balance. And that's 3. Good. And then wrap up with the test, so you're gluing those fingers together. Open the palms as fast as you can, eyes are closed. Looking for any delays, new frequencies, or slowness. Good. And then going into your neck, chin into your chest, asking the pain, pinch, pull into the back of the neck or the front of the neck. And then we got extension, rocking the neck back, pain, pull. And forward, rotation, pain, pinch, pull. And then the other side, is there any difference? Pain, pinch, pull. And forward, side flexion. Same thing, pain, pinch, pull. And then any differences on either side. And then side flexion and rotation. Good, and then normal flexion, putting your feet together. Touching your toes, pain, pinch, pull in the back, also looking at how they're bending into their spine, what's moving, what's not moving. And then also checking if either legs are tight. So if one side feels worse than the other, you're going to kickstand one leg, reach to the ground, remember how that feels. And then switch sides. My right side is significantly tighter. We up. And then global extension. So we're going to the wall. 3 steps out from the wall. Your own steps. Glue your feet together, arms up over your head, reaching back towards the wall. Extension. Same question, pain, pinch, pull. And then staying in that position, rotation. So coming across. The other side. Or checking how their hips are moving on their each rotation. And then we have side flexion, hands over the head. Same thing. And if they're limited, take the arms out of the way, side flexion with no arms overhead. Checking if that's different. And if you see a shoulder-ish, like if it does feel better with your hands down, shoulders. Good. And then squatting. We go. Is this like that? Here's a squat first. Squat first. Squatting. Slowly squat. And hanging pinch pull means hips ankle or tightness in the back. and then single leg balance. You got 10 seconds eyes open. You're looking for wobbly ankles, toes falling off to the side. And then close your eyes 10 seconds. See the pain. Are they falling off when their eyes are closed? Good. Switch your feet. 10 seconds eyes open. 10 seconds eyes closed. Good. And if they fall, their test is done. And then single leg balance, air lunge. And then check both sides. Knees caving in, remain balanced. And then.
That's right. And then the ground side.
And then the ground side.
So if any of the kind of the primary, if the primary tests are clear and don't feel the imbalances, move on. If they're like, yeah, the shoulders feel tight, one side feels different, hamstring, tightness, or is restricted, then you go into the ground, T-spine rotation, Faber's test, straight leg raise, shoulders, right, to kind of clear out or look at if we need to isolate something. But if those top tier tests are clear, move on. There's no major issues that we're looking for. If there are restrictions, yeah, then go into a little breakouts and see if it's hips, ankles, what have you. Okay?
Quick one.
Yeah.
Single leg.
So if they're saying like, oh, hamstrings feel tight on the right, shut it down. Or they're restricted, limited, not more restricted, shut it down.
And then fingers.
Blow rotation feels restricted or feels different, shut that. Right? T-spine, feels seated. You can do the floor or chair. So if the rotation feels restricted or extension feels restricted, check. Right? So that's why I'm asking, is there any pinch pain pulled one side feel different than the other? And if the answer is yes, then go into the parts and pieces to see why they might be feeling restricted. Clean that up, recheck. Cool. So out of all of those tests, for the kettlebell swing in particular, what do we want to make sure is clear? Flexion and extension primarily. A secondary one will be rotation, especially if we're doing one arm. Okay? Again, we don't need, if we're doing a two-arm swing and there's mild rotation, is it deep tissue? No, but again, if they're coming down, they're feeling tension on one side or the other, there might be some twisting going on. So let's just make note of that. And if they do feel different, just find out why it feels different. And then just clean it up real quick. Okay. So flexion and extension, you want to get more nuance, some of the cerebellar stuff. If they're doing a lot of high volume or one-arm stuff, cerebellar stuff becomes more relevant because they're going to pull towards that side because of the torque that happens with it. Okay, cool. Going into this kettlebell swing, what is a precursor or prerequisite that everybody needs in order to do a kettlebell swing or qualify to do a kettlebell swing? Hinge. Everybody grab a kettlebell. One that is not light enough that you can lift over your shoulders and your arms, but not so heavy where you're going to struggle with the hinge. So we're looking for that in between. Because the weight will teach you. If the weight's too light, we can cheat and compensate. If the weight's too heavy, it collapses us. If it's just right, we will be forced to do it the right way. So if you have a weight that's too light, we're not going to get much from it. But if you don't feel comfortable with it, that's fine. Okay. Everybody can perform a hip hinge, deadlift. And this is where it's important to know where the hinge is coming from. Because oftentimes what we see when people are doing kettlebell swings is they're squatting the swing and the arc is getting too big. And it's partly because their hinge is too dominant. They are not purely hinging at the hips and they're sinking into the knees. And that's not a problem if we're lifting a dead weight off the ground, but it is a problem when we're doing ballistics, especially with the kettlebell swing where it needs to be a pure hip hinge and the only muscles working on the backside for acceleration are the glutes and the hamstrings and the core. If we start squatting the swing, the arc gets too low and then it can pull us into our backs, or we hit and scuff my floor and then get upset. Okay? That's the more important part. So, kettlebell deadlift looks good. So our clients are just like, okay, do a couple reps just with that. The next thing we want to look at is, can we breath match? The breathing becomes more important to swing than deadlift because it's repetitive and it's ballistic. And we have to make sure that the breathing matches the movement. And what I mean by that is, when we're in this lower position, we want to be braced. We do not want tension to leave here, because if it leaves here, we get pulled and we get collapsed. And then when we're releasing an upswing, when the kettlebell floats, that's when the tension can be released. Like a punch, like a strike, like anything else, because we don't want to hold our breath the entire time because we're gassed out. So, engage with your kettlebell. Chest up, right? Grip, snip, and a little bit of air at the top. And it's important that we don't, because if I let all the air out, what did they just lose? Core of my lung, right? So if I release all that air at the top, I'm going to drift into my lower back. So it's grip, snip, and you make that little noise with the tongue. It's to keep it pressurized, but you're not letting all the air out. Now everyone stay up there, stay at the top. I'm going to come around and give you a little tap. If you're braced and locked in the right spots, not a problem. I'm using the back of my hand, okay? I'm not doing this and this, okay? Back of the hand, tell the client, I'm going to give you a little tap on the side of the hip to make sure that the tension is in the right spots, okay? So they're braced here and here, because if we don't have a good lock here, we go to the lower back, okay? Back of the hand, so just tell them to tap, I'm going to come over and just, I'm not going to do it. We're just keeping. Cool. Everybody. Now we are all familiar with the mechanics of correction. Say someone is squatting their deadlift. What can we do to cue them out of that knee dominant hinge? Dowel across the front of the legs. What else can we use? If they're going bum down, what can we cue them to do?
Get a resistance band.
Yep, exactly. Hold into that position, right? That's a good one. We can use the wall. So come down, touch your bum to the wall, right? So we can give them some extra feedback to make sure that they're hinging properly. So we're all familiar with that. Cool. What can we do if you notice that they're leaning back? Say you do start to do their kettlebell swings. What can we cue them to do? So this becomes, then the issue becomes, they're not using the right muscles to lock in at the right time, and the swing is getting away. So we use two primary movements to prime the system to get them to feel which muscles are supposed to engage at the top of the kettlebell swing. And that would be your front support plank and your glute bridge. So everybody go down. So you see a client, and they're doing this with their deadlift, right? They're hinging, they're overextending. They're not using glutes, and they're not using the anterior core. They're using too much quad, they're using too much low back. So everybody lock into your front support, grip the ground, glutes are locked. Again, come around, give them a little tap, make sure, tap the glutes, okay? Now do a shoulder touch. Good. Now it's a rotation control exercise. So kind of slow the legs a little bit. There you go. Now you got a lower base of support. There you go. Nice. And breath. Okay? So now they can feel what they're supposed to feel in the top position of the kettlebell swing. If they're not driving their glutes, check their glute bridge. Okay? So everybody go to a glute bridge. And again, posterior pelvic tilt, set the core, drive the hips. You can come around and give them a little tap on the hips. What you can also do, just like we did with the shoulder taps to check the anterior core from a tripod position, we can do a glute march. So we're going to go high hips and then lock glutes. We can also, in this position, if they have, quote, tight hamstrings, drive the leg, floss the leg. Good. So now we're getting that active mobility on the back sides of the leg. Okay, so we can go straight leg up and down if they can manage it, or march and then straighten the knee. And if we're doing single arm swings, say they're ready for that, what's another core facilitation or activation exercise on the ground that we do? Tempo, right? So you gotta make sure that lateral sling is in the body.
Now, would it be to matter, elbow, hand?
For ease of use, elbow. Just want to do the feel, right? We're not doing side supports, it's not relevant to locking up the shoulder there. But as long as they can feel lateral glute, oblique, and lat, they're in the right system. They're using the right muscles. So it's important that they can be able to hold that. And you can play with bridges and slings and whatnot. The idea is get them to feel those slings. Anterior sling, posterior sling, lateral sling. Now they know, okay, I'm supposed to feel tension around this area.